Hey Rising Stars, what if I told you that the secret to making your audition stand out was less about your lines and more about physical actions? Well, stick around, because in this lesson I'm going to explain how to make your audition into a mini-movie so that your scenes pop and that you get booked. Oh, and don't forget, you can always book one-on-one coaching with me by clicking the link in the description below. Physical actions and visual cues. I'm going to simplify why physical action is so important and why it is the second thing I'm speaking on. TV and film is a visual medium, and an audition is like a mini-movie. If you can execute your audition like a mini-movie with action and some blocking, casting and directors will know they can trust you when you get on set. Let me explain that in a little more detail. When you get on set, it is usually a sequence of events. For example, you have to say your line, get out of the car, say another line as you're getting out of the car, and hit the mark that the director is giving you. Alternatively, you may get a director that gives you no direction, and you have to come up with your own blocking. So now do you see why action and visual cues are important? They are not only telling the whole story of the scene, but they are also showing that you know what you're doing. I highly recommend a physical action to start and end every scene, and if possible to add physical actions throughout. Though please note, physical actions are always to tell story. We are not just doing it because it's fun. Now, because this may be new to you, I want to give you some examples right now. The most simple ones, of course, are walking in, sitting down, or a personal favorite, turning round into the scene. Now, these have to make sense in the scene. So for example, what happens if the character is mid-conversation, or sitting down already? We just have to use our imagination. So say we are in an interrogation scene. Let's think about that. Who's to say you can't have your hands tied in front of you, right? And then act out taking a sip of water. Alternatively, you could have your hands tied behind your back and have a moment of struggle or being uncomfortable. Does this make sense for the scene? Is it painting a picture? What about if we smiled and looked back and forth between the interrogators? We need something to ground us in the scene and get us into the scene. And guess what? A physical action does just that. Here's a list of my favorite physical actions. Putting your hand to your partner's hand. Please note you're not actually physically touching your scene partner. You would just put your hand out across like this and imagine you're taking their hand. This is good for romantic scenes and caring scenes, tickling and poking and laughing with your scene partner, entering on the phone and looking around to spot your scene partner, cleaning a glass, cleaning a tool, looking at a grain of salt in your hand, good for contemplative scenes, working on a computer, knocking on a door to enter. Now, let me stress, they must make sense for the story of the scene. Think of it as an introduction to your character. We're already giving a visual cue of who they are and what they're going through. So now that you have a grasp on physical actions, let's discuss how we integrate them throughout the scene to tell story. As mentioned, we have to start thinking of the scene as a mini-movie. What moments can you tell through picture? It may sound like a lot, but anything you can make physical on camera, do it. I often hear actors say, I can't do all that action, and I can't help thinking, why not? And someone else will, and that person will appear like a living human and not just a talking head. Most of the time your audition is filmed chest up. That's the standard, so often you can recreate the action if you don't have the prop needed. Though I love props, and unless casting specifically says don't use them, then use them. This used to be different as casting didn't want you bringing in a knife or a glass of water into the room, but now almost all auditions are self-tape, Zoom, or EcoCast Live, at least in the US. Now, if you have an in-person audition, use your imagination in the same way, but maybe leave the prop at home, and instead use your script as a prop. A script could be a gun or a knife. It's just how convincing you do when you use it, right? To stress again, it's important to try and integrate physical action throughout the audition, just like you would if you're on set. But even if you just started with a physical action and end with one, it would be better than nothing. And I totally understand sometimes the character is just talking for a long time, but there are always things you can do. Hand on heart for expressing love or an apology. looking down for shame and embarrassment, sniffing or scratching if your character isn't feeling well or stressed. Eye lines. Eye lines are an important factor in telling story. What is an eye line? It is where you place the other person or people in your scene. Always place your reader or scene partner next to or close to the camera lens. Now, if on Zoom, you can look directly at the reader on screen. But aesthetically, it will look better if you put a post-it note next to the camera and have that as your eye line. Now, this is a tough one, as it will be harder to react, but if you listen well, you will react as needed. Zoom makes the whole audition thing a little less personal, so if you want to pin the reader and read with them, that is totally acceptable. Some casting prefer lines close to the camera, some prefer you read with them directly on screen. Don't be afraid to ask. I'll speak more on self-taping and Zoom later. Great, so we've covered physical actions and visual cues now. So you really know how to go through your scene and paint the picture and tell a story that's going to excite the viewer. Great. Moving on. You've got the stars. And don't forget, physical actions make your scene feel real and grounded, okay? But if you want to have a deeper dive on this and want to work with me one-on-one, then just click the link in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe and have a great day.